This story is for anyone who's ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted. It's about reclaiming your voice and stepping into your own power, just like Ji-hyun did. If you've ever wanted to rewrite your own story, this journey is for you. What would your story look like if you stopped living for others and started living for yourself? I had spent my whole life giving. I had given my love, my energy, my heart, and for what? To be constantly overlooked? To be made to feel small, like I didn't matter? And it wasn't just one person. It was everyone I loved. My family, my friends, my fiancé. They all took from me. They took and never once thought to give back. It wasn't a new feeling. Joo-hyun, my fiancé, the man I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with, had been taking me for granted for as long as I could remember. I had convinced myself time and time again that it was just a phase, that we were busy, that I needed to be patient. After all, didn't love require patience? But now, as I stand here looking back at all those moments, I realize just how wrong I was. There was the time when I had spent weeks planning a surprise for Joo-hyun's birthday. I knew he was stressed with work, so I arranged for a quiet dinner at his favorite restaurant, the one we went to on our first date. I even arranged for his favorite band to perform. It was supposed to be a beautiful, romantic evening, just the two of us, but the entire night he kept checking his phone, glancing at his watch, barely acknowledging that I was even there. When we finally left, he didn't thank me. No, instead, he snapped at me for not letting him meet a client earlier that evening. This could have waited, Sayeri, he said with a frown, as if I had done something wrong by wanting to show him how much I cared. That night wasn't an isolated incident. There was the time I helped him with his business proposal, staying up late for nights on end, even sacrificing a project that I was working on for myself. But when the presentation was over and he was congratulated on the success, he didn't even mention me. He didn't even acknowledge my sacrifice. Instead, he told his colleagues how lucky he was to have such a dependable fiancé who would always clean up his messes. His words, even wrapped in praise, stung, with the implication that my value to him was just as disposable as the tasks I did for him. There were the countless moments, when I came second, when he would cancel our plans at the last minute, choosing to hang out with his friends or work instead. "I'm just really busy, Siori. You know how it is," he would say, and I would nod, feeling like a fool for even asking. But it wasn't just the neglect. It was the indifference. The way he made me feel like I was nothing more than an accessory to his life, an accessory that had outlived its use. Still, I stayed. I stayed because I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could make him see me. I stayed because I had convinced myself that love was enough, that my devotion would eventually be reciprocated. But the truth was, I had been waiting for a miracle. And miracles don't happen when you're the only one putting in the effort. The engagement party was supposed to be my moment. I had dreamt of this night for years. The moment when I would finally be celebrated. The night when I could stand proudly beside Joo-hyun, ready to begin the life we had promised each other. But as I walked into that room, feeling a hollow excitement, I realized that the people I thought I could trust were all playing their parts in a script I never wrote. I remember how it felt. Walking in, the lights sparkling, the sound of laughter surrounding me. Everyone was celebrating, their faces bright and happy. I thought I'd finally feel like the center of attention. But as I scanned the room, it was clear no one really saw me. My mother was too busy talking about the new furniture she was buying for her home to care about me. My best friend, Minji, was chatting with another guest about a recent trip she'd taken, never once asking how I was feeling. And Joo-hyun? He was too busy making connections with his colleagues, his back turned to me more than it was facing me. But it wasn't until I overheard them that everything changed. "You really think she's the one?" Joo-hyun's voice reached my ears first, his tone dismissive and indifferent. "She's perfect for the image, you know? She'll look good on my arm, play the part of the devoted wife. But don't ask her to think for herself, she's too soft." The words were like a slap. My heart dropped to my stomach, and for a moment the room seemed to spin. Soft. That's what I was. Soft. A delicate thing, a woman who would only be noticed when it was convenient. But I wasn't his equal. I wasn't someone he admired. I was just a pretty accessory he could display when it suited him. And you know it's even better? Minji's voice joined in, her laughter ringing through the air like glass breaking. She's so desperate to be needed. She'll never leave him. No matter how much he neglects her, no matter how little he values her, she's the perfect little martyr. Always giving, always sacrificing. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My fiancé, the man I had given my heart to, was mocking me. And Michi, my so-called best friend, was laughing along. My family didn't even blink. They were all complicit in this cruel joke. I had given them everything, and this is how they saw me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a means to an end. I was an extension of their own desires, a trophy they could show off. A trophy that had outlived its usefulness. It wasn't new. It wasn't new at all. This had been my life for years. The slow erosion of my worth, the constant disregard for who I truly was. But this moment, this final blow, shattered everything. I turned away from the voices, walking out of that room with the weight of everything crashing down on me. As I locked myself in the bathroom, the tears came. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of realization. I had been living their script for far too long. I had been playing the role they wrote for me, and I had lost myself in the process. In that moment, I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep pretending that I was fine. I wasn't fine. I wasn't okay. And I couldn't keep being the woman they wanted me to be. I went to my room, sat at the desk, and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but the words came easily. I wrote the note that would be my goodbye to the life I had built on their terms. Or in the script, I'm writing my own ending. I left the note on the desk. I didn't need to say goodbye. I didn't need to explain. They wouldn't understand. I slipped out of the house without a sound, and as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The first step toward my new life. When I walked away, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that life any longer. I couldn't stay in the place where I had given and been treated like a shadow. But fate, it seemed, had its own plans for me. A week after I left everything behind, I received a letter. It was unexpected, an envelope with my grandmother's handwriting, the one who had always been an enigma to me, a woman whose life was a series of whispered stories. I never understood her fully, but I always admired her strength, her independence. She had lived life on her own terms. The letter informed me that my grandmother had passed away, but more importantly, it revealed something I never knew existed, an inheritance, a vast fortune tied to a hotel empire that spanned continents. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming at first. A hotel empire? My grandmother had always kept to herself, rarely speaking of her wealth or her legacy. Yet here I was, now the sole heir to everything she had built. I could have walked away from it all, started fresh with nothing, but something about this felt like the key to my transformation. This wasn't just money, it was my ticket to an entirely new life. I took the inheritance and changed my name. Ciori was a ghost of the past, a victim of others' manipulation. No one would recognize me anymore. Not as the timid woman I used to be. I became Song Ji-eun, an heiress. The power I had craved, the respect I had never received, was now mine to command. The world I had once begged to accept me was suddenly a world that had no choice but to acknowledge me. I walked into my new life with the kind of confidence I had never known before. No longer was I the quiet, obedient woman who always put others first. Song Ji-hyun was someone who demanded attention, someone whose every word was calculated, whose every move was deliberate. She was not afraid of power. She wielded it like a weapon. It wasn't long before I started making waves. My grandmother's hotel empire was a luxury brand, one that catered to the richest, most influential people in the world. I learned the ropes quickly, meeting with investors, attending elite parties, navigating corporate boardrooms with ease. Where Ciori would have been lost and overwhelmed, Ji-hoon thrived. I no longer had to tiptoe around people, afraid of upsetting anyone. Now, as the one making the decisions, people listened to me, they respected me, they feared me. It was in those first few weeks, walking through the glittering world of the powerful and the wealthy, that I realized something profound. These people weren't any different from my old life. They wore their masks, just like my family, my friends, and Joo-hyun had. They had their own games to play, their own manipulations, but I didn't need them anymore. They needed me. I spent my days observing, taking note of every person who had once been a part of my old life. My family, my friends, my ex-fiancé, they were all still out there, living in their comfortable, predictable bubbles. But I was no longer a part of their world. Instead, I watched from the sidelines, taking careful note of their weaknesses, their secrets, the cracks in their perfect facades, and I began to plan. My transformation wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about the clothes I wore or the luxurious lifestyle I now lived. It was deeper than that. I was no longer Sori, the woman who loved unconditionally, the woman who forgave easily. I had become Song Si-hun, a woman who understood the cost of trust and the price of loyalty. I had learned the hard way that love, when given to the wrong people, was nothing more than a weapon used against you. In the following months, I began to build a network. I sought out the most powerful people I could find, business tycoons, influencers, and even people whose reputations were tainted. The world was full of people who owed favors, who were willing to trade power for protection, and I knew how to make them owe me. I leveraged my inheritance, using it not just to secure my position, but to become an unstoppable force. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I cared about control. And with every deal I made, every partnership I formed, I felt myself growing stronger, more ruthless. The sweet, naive Seori was a distant memory. In her place was Ji-hyun, cold, calculating, and ready to take what she deserved. But there was something else that changed, something that had been quietly stirring within me. It wasn't just about taking power, it was about understanding it. Every interaction, every conversation became a game to me. I saw through the masks of those around me, and I realized that the world wasn't as complicated as I had once thought. People wanted to be seen, they wanted to be respected, they wanted to be feared. And once I understood that, I knew exactly how to get what I wanted. One evening, after yet another successful meeting with investors, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my penthouse. The reflection that stared back at me was a woman I barely recognized, but not in the way I feared. This wasn't the scared woman who had once been afraid of her own shadow. This was a woman who had found her power. I looked at my reflection, my sharp eyes, my confident posture, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I felt whole. I wasn't just playing a part anymore. I was writing my own script, and I was the lead character. It was in that moment, standing in front of the mirror, that I understood the transformation wasn't just external. I had rewritten myself, from the inside out. Song Ji-hyun wasn't a mask I wore. It was who I had always been, buried beneath the layers of self-doubt and fear, and now she was free. I was free. The woman in the mirror wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't the girl who loved too much, who gave too much, who let others walk all over her. She was someone else entirely. Someone who would never let anyone take her for granted again. And with that realization, I knew that the real journey had just begun. The woman I had become wasn't just an heiress. She was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing was going to stop her now. The world had always been a game to me. The rules were clear, but it took years to realize that the only way to win was to play by my own terms. I had spent too long being the one who sacrificed, the one who gave, the one who loved. Now, it was time to take back everything that had been stolen from me. My first target? Joo-hyun, my ex-fiancé, the man who had used me as a stepping stone to climb higher in his career, all while pretending to love me. It was time to destroy everything he had built with my sacrifices. I had known from the very beginning that Joo-hyun's feelings for me were never genuine. He didn't care for me. He cared for the status I'd brought him, my family's wealth, my connections, the way I could open doors for him. All of it was a means to an end for him. He never saw me as an equal. I was the perfect accessory for his carefully curated life. but I had been blind for far too long. Now, as Song Ji-hoon, I was no longer a naive woman. I was a woman who understood the cost of pretending, the price of wearing a mask. I had power now, real power, and I was going to use it to tear him down piece by piece. It started with a carefully orchestrated leak, a whisper of a scandal, a rumor about Joo-hyun's business dealings, a backdoor deal with shady investors that could ruin his reputation. I made sure it hit the news at the most opportune moment, just as his company was about to launch a new project, one that was supposed to elevate him to new heights in the business world. I watched as the media grabbed hold of the story, twisting it, turning it into something unrecognizable. At first, Joo-hyun denied everything. He called it fake news, a smear campaign, but the more he denied it, the more it stuck. His investors started pulling out, his partners grew wary, and the public began to turn on him. It didn't take long for his carefully built empire to start crumbling. I sat back and watched it all unfold. The man who had used me to climb the ladder, the man who had dismissed me as nothing more than a trophy, he was falling apart. The foundation of his success was being stripped away, and it was my doing. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving something to myself. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the woman who would be ignored and discarded. I was the one who controlled the narrative now. Next on my list was Minji, my so-called best friend. She had been the one who always belittled me, who used my insecurities against me to elevate her own status. I had been there for her, listened to her, supported her through everything. And what did she do in return? She laughed behind my back, mocked me, and reveled in my pain. The same woman who had once pretended to be my closest confidant was now going to feel the consequences of her actions. I knew her secrets, the ones she thought no one else knew. Her affair with a married man, the shady deals she had made with influencers, the backstabbing that had secured her position in the social circle. I held all the cards, and it was time to play them. I sent an anonymous email to a reporter who specialized in exposing the rich and powerful. It was filled with enough evidence to ruin Minji's life. A few well-placed photos, some text messages, and a trail of financial transactions was all it took. Within hours, the story was live. The headline read, "Socialite Scandal, the Truth Behind the Glittering Facade." I watched as the world turned on her. The rich, powerful people who had once called her their queen now turned their backs on her. The influencers she had once manipulated now distanced themselves from her. Minji's status, her wealth, her credibility, all of it was gone. She was exposed for who she truly was, a manipulative, deceitful woman who had used others for her own gain. I didn't feel any satisfaction in seeing her fall. In fact, there was something strangely empty about it. But I knew one thing. She had been a part of my old life, and she was never going to have a place in my new one. But nothing compared to what happened next. My family, the ones who had never appreciated me, who had always taken me for granted, were now begging for my help. My mother, who had always ignored me for my brother's sake, now found herself on the brink of financial ruin. The company she had worked so hard to build was facing bankruptcy. My father, who had never once supported me, now came to me with his tail between his legs, asking for a loan that could save their business. They didn't know what to do. They had no one left, and they thought I would save them. It was almost poetic. They had discarded me, treated me like I was invisible, but now they needed me. Now they came crawling back, pleading for my help. I was done being the woman who always picked up the pieces for them. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love, trying to make them see me, and what had it gotten me? Nothing but betrayal and neglect. So I watched them, sitting in front of me, desperate, broken, and clueless. They didn't even realize who they were begging. The woman they had tossed aside, the woman they had used, was now in a position of power. I didn't save them. Not a chance. Instead, I let them crash. I let their business crumble. I let their empire fall apart. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. If anything, I felt relief. The burden of being the family's savior had always weighed on my shoulders, but now it was theirs to carry. I wasn't their solution. I wasn't their fix. I was free. I remember the look on my mother's face as she realized I wasn't going to help. The panic in her eyes, the desperation in her voice as she begged me to reconsider. But I didn't budge. I wasn't the scared girl who wanted their approval anymore. I wasn't the woman who had cried alone in her room, hoping they would notice me. I was Song Ji-hoon, and I played by my own rules now. I watched them fall, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. This was my reckoning. This was the moment I had been waiting for. And they had no idea that the woman they had taken for granted was the one holding the power now. Their world was crumbling, and I was standing on the sidelines, watching it burn. And I couldn't have been more at peace. I had been unstoppable. One after the other, I had torn down the walls that had kept me trapped for so long. Juhyun, Minji, my family, each of them had fallen, one piece at a time under the weight of their own betrayals. It had all been so easy, so satisfying. The sweet rush of vengeance filled me with a power I never thought possible. But as I stood there, poised to deliver the final blow to my family's failing business, something unexpected happened. A shadow stepped into my perfectly controlled world. His name was Kang Tae-jun. I first met him at an exclusive event, an art exhibition meant for the city's elite. I had attended to expand my circle, to continue cementing my place in the world I now ruled. But as I stepped into the grand hall, I caught a glimpse of him from across the room. A man with sharp, observant eyes, a camera hanging casually at his side, as though he were waiting for something, or someone, to unravel. Taejun was different from the others. His gaze wasn't admiring or sycophantic like the people I was used to. It was calculating, keenly aware. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt something shift, a tension in the air, a realization that he had seen right through me. I wasn't the perfect, flawless woman that the others saw. There was more to me than the cold, confident facade I had carefully constructed, and he knew it. At first, I dismissed him as a simple journalist, a small-time reporter among the masses of flashy socialites. But then I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He was watching me, studying me, not with admiration, but with a curiosity that unnerved me. I had learned to control every detail of my life, to manipulate the narrative, but something about him made me feel like I had lost control. It wasn't long before he made his move. I was standing near the bar, sipping my drink, when he approached me with a calm but deliberate smile. He was unassuming, but his presence seemed to fill the space between us. "Song Ji-yoon, right?" he asked, his voice low as if he were measuring his words carefully. "Or should I call you Seori?" The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. He knew who I had been. And he wasn't just guessing, he had uncovered the truth. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly masked my reaction with a cool, dismissive smile. "I'm afraid you have the wrong person," I replied, my voice steady, though my mind was racing. Taejun's smile didn't waver. "You can deny it all you want, but you've left a trail, Jihyun, a very interesting one, and I intend to follow it." His words were not a threat, they were a promise. He was not here to expose me, at least not yet. He wasn't trying to take me down. Instead, he was offering something different, something unexpected. He wanted to write my story, the real story. "You see," Taejun continued, his tone shifting to something more intriguing. "I've been tracking you for a while now. Your rise, your transformation, it's remarkable. But what's more interesting is why you've chosen this path. Why leave everything behind? Why tear down the people who once mattered to you? You're more than just a woman seeking revenge. I want to know who you really are. What makes you tick?" I stared at him, my grip tightening around my glass. This was not the conversation I had expected. I had been prepared for him to try and expose me, to destroy everything I had worked for. But instead, he was offering me something I hadn't even considered. A chance to tell my side of the story. A chance to be understood. To be seen. Not as the villain, but as a person who had fought to survive in a world that had never cared for her. His proposition was both tempting and terrifying. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anyone. But there was something about Taejun that made me hesitate. His sharp insights, the way he seemed to read me like an open book. It unsettled me. "I'm not interested in telling my story to anyone," I said, the words cold, though my mind was racing. I've worked too hard to get here, too hard to make them all pay. I don't need to explain myself to anyone. Taijun's eyes softened, but there was no judgment in them. I don't think you're doing this for revenge anymore, Jihyun. I think you're doing it because you've convinced yourself it's the only way to be free. But is it really freedom if you're still carrying all that pain, all that anger, inside you? His words cut deeper than I expected. They were too close to the truth. I had convinced myself that my revenge was what I needed, that it was the only way to heal. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of myself I had lost in the process. Don't tell me what I need, I snapped, my pride flaring up. But even as I said it, I felt a tightness in my chest, a reminder of everything I had sacrificed, everything I had become. Taijun didn't back down. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm offering you a choice. You can continue on this path, but I'm willing to help you find out what's really driving you. The real you, not the one you've built to survive. You're more than just your revenge. You've got a story to tell, Taijun. I think it's time you finally told it. His proposition was not just an offer to expose me, but a challenge to confront myself, to look beyond the facade I had built. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about understanding who I had become, and whether I was willing to let go of the woman I had been. We spent weeks in tense, cautious conversation, meeting in secret, pushing each other's boundaries. I would share fragments of my story, the painful moments that had shaped me, but I refused to let him see the full picture. He pushed me to confront the emptiness I had been filling with vengeance, but I resisted. I wasn't ready to admit that the rage, the coldness that had taken over me, was starting to feel like a prison. And yet, over time, something shifted. I began to trust him, not fully, but enough to let down my guard in small, quiet moments. I talked about my past, about the family I had once hoped would love me, about the man I had once believed would be my partner. And as I spoke, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: vulnerability. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. Taijun listened. He didn't judge, he didn't try to fix me, he just listened. And in those moments, I realized that I wasn't just telling him my story, I was telling myself. I was reclaiming the parts of me I had buried under anger and revenge. Our conversations went from adversarial to something unexpected, something tender. There were moments of silence, moments where I would catch him watching me, and in those moments, I felt something I had long forgotten, the warmth of connection. I'm not who I was, I said one evening, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was writing my own ending, but now I'm not so sure. Taijin's gaze softened, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being analyzed. I felt seen. It's never too late to change the story, Ji-hoon, he said quietly. You've already taken control, but you don't have to be the villain in your own narrative. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to start rewriting my life, not just for revenge, but for the woman I wanted to become. The more I stood in the spotlight of my own victory, the more the shadows of my past seemed to stretch further into the corners of my mind. It was strange. The higher I climbed, the harder it was to breathe. Every success, every downfall I caused should have felt like a triumph, but they didn't. They felt like a hollow echo, reverberating in a place inside me I hadn't known was still there. I had spent so much time dismantling everyone who had wronged me that I had forgotten to ask myself, what was I really achieving? Was this healing? Or was it just another way to destroy myself? Taijun's presence in my life was a constant reminder of the battle I was fighting, both with the world and with myself. He had seen beneath the surface, seen the woman I was before all of this, before the transformation, before the masks and games. He had seen me when I had still believed in love, still believed in forgiveness. And now, as I stood in front of the mirror, the cold, unfeeling woman I had become stared back at me. Song Ji-yeon was a creation, a construct built out of the fragments of Seori's broken heart. But deep down, I knew I wasn't whole. I was missing something. Something that felt irreplaceable. And that something wasn't power. It was peace. I remember the first time Taijun challenged me to really think about my journey. It was late one night. I had just finished another meeting with my family where I had made it clear I would not be stepping in to save them. They had made their bed, and now they could lie in it. I had nothing left to give them. "Do you ever stop, Jian?" Taejian had asked quietly, his voice laced with both concern and curiosity. "Do you ever ask yourself if this is really what you want? Is destroying them really healing you?" His words had cut deeper than I was willing to admit. Of course I had thought about it, but thinking about it didn't make me want to stop. I couldn't. Not yet. The vengeance felt like it was the only thing keeping me alive. The world had hurt me, and I had spent so long trying to prove I could fight back. How could I stop now, when I had already come this far? But his question lingered, and in the quiet moments when the adrenaline of my victories faded, I began to feel the weight of it. Was I truly healing, or was I just making the same mistakes over and over, thinking that destruction would somehow make me whole? The flashbacks hit me when I least expected it, unexpected, jagged reminders of the woman I used to be. I had tried to bury those memories, to leave them behind in the past, but they resurfaced, uninvited. There was the moment I first realized how invisible I was to the people who were supposed to love me. It was a quiet evening, just like any other, when my mother had asked me to go pick up my brother's dry cleaning. I didn't mind, of course. I would have done anything for her, anything to prove that I was worthy of her love. But as I sat there, waiting for her to acknowledge me, to thank me for the countless things I had done, I saw it. She wasn't looking at me. She was talking to my brother, who had just returned from a business trip, completely ignoring me. She never once said thank you. She never once saw me. There were the countless nights I spent alone, staying up late to help Juhin with his work, his projects, his dreams. He never asked me how my day went. He never cared about my struggles. I was just an accessory to his life, a person who existed to make his world easier. And every time I gave, I hoped that he would see me, hoped that he would love me the way I loved him. But he didn't. And I kept giving, always thinking that maybe, just maybe, he would notice me one day. I had sacrificed so much, only to be left with empty hands, a hollow heart, and a soul that no longer recognized itself. Those memories crushed me. They reminded me of a version of myself that I had buried beneath the weight of my vengeance. I had spent so much time trying to tear down everyone who had taken from me that I had forgotten to ask if I was ever enough for myself. Taijun noticed the change in me before I even realized it. He had an uncanny ability to see through the walls I had built, to see the cracks in the armor I had so carefully crafted. He pushed me, time and again, to confront the truth. But the truth was something I wasn't ready to face. "You don't need to destroy them to heal, Jaehyun," he said one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "You're doing this because you think it'll fill the emptiness inside you, but it won't. You've spent so long trying to prove something to them, to everyone else. When do you start proving something to yourself?" I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to tell him that I was in control, that this was my choice, that no one could tell me how to heal. But his words held a weight that I couldn't ignore. Could I forgive them? Could I really let go of the anger that had driven me for so long? "I can't forgive them," I said quietly, my voice trembling with a rawness I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. "I can't forgive the people who never saw me, who never cared for me the way I cared for them. They don't deserve forgiveness." Taijin didn't reply right away. He simply sat there, watching me, letting me speak the truth I had been avoiding. I felt my heart open for the first time in a long while. It wasn't a feeling of relief. It was a recognition of the pain I had been carrying, the burden I had been too afraid to set down. "You don't have to forgive them, Jihyun," Taejun said after a long pause, "but you have to forgive yourself. You're the one holding on to this anger, this need for vengeance, and you're the one who will carry it for the rest of your life unless you let go." His words were simple, but they hit me like a tidal wave. I didn't know if I could forgive myself. I didn't know if I could let go of the person I had become. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep carrying this weight. The woman I had become was not the woman I wanted to be. I had spent so long trying to fix everything and everyone around me that I had forgotten to fix myself. And in that raw, vulnerable moment, I saw something in Taijin's eyes, something beyond the journalist, beyond the observer. It was understanding. It was empathy. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like I wasn't alone. I don't know how to heal, I whispered, my voice cracking. I don't know how to be the person I was meant to be. You don't have to have all the answers, he said softly. But you're not alone anymore, Jihyun. And maybe that's a good place to start. For the first time in so long, I allowed myself to feel the pain, the loss, the confusion. And in that moment, something inside me began to shift. I didn't have all the answers and I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt the possibility of healing. And that perhaps was enough. It wasn't the end of my journey, but it was a beginning. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward finding peace. The gala was the perfect stage. The grand ballroom shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and marble floors that glistened under the soft lighting. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and expensive champagne, mingling with the murmur of high society guests. It was a gathering of the city's elite, business tycoons, politicians, and socialites, all of them wearing their masks, pretending to be someone they weren't, and I was going to show them who I really was. This was my moment. The culmination of everything I had worked for, the final act of the game I had played so carefully, so methodically. My ex-fiancé, Joo-hyun, had fallen from grace. His business was in shambles, his name a stain in the public eye. Minji, my once loyal friend, was no longer the queen of the social scene. Her secrets were out, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. And my family? They were on the brink of financial collapse, desperate for a lifeline that they had once refused to offer me. I had them all exactly where I wanted them. But there was something I hadn't prepared for. Something that had started to gnaw at me the moment I stepped into the venue. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. I wasn't sure what it was about anymore. The excitement, the exhilaration of seeing them all suffer had started to feel hollow. The anger that had driven me all this time was no longer enough to fill the emptiness inside me. As the night wore on, I moved through the crowd like a shadow. People acknowledged me, admiring the woman I had become. Rich, powerful, untouchable. But I wasn't interested in their praise. I wasn't interested in the approval of anyone here. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove something to others to make them see me, but tonight, standing in the heart of the city's most influential event, I realized I didn't need anyone's validation. The question now was whether I wanted to expose the people who had wronged me or whether I was ready to let go of it all. My heart pounded as I watched Joo-hyun and Minji laughing in the corner, oblivious to the storm they had created by their own selfishness. They had always been so certain of themselves, so convinced that they were invincible, that nothing would ever touch them. The truth was, they had no idea what I was capable of. But there was a part of me that didn't want to destroy them anymore. Was this the moment when I would finally take control? Or would I continue down the path of vengeance? The guests were beginning to whisper. Their eyes shifted between me and the others, uncertain, intrigued. They could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of something big. It was as if they were waiting for the drama to unfold. But the question was, what would it be? A final blow to the people who had taken everything from me? Or something more subtle? The weight of the decision pressed down on me. I could expose myself to the world, reveal my true identity, tear down the lives of those who had wronged me. I could relish in the destruction, watch as their carefully built facades crumbled to the ground. It would be glorious. I would be the one who emerged victorious, the one who had beaten them all. But what would it cost me? Was that the woman I wanted to be? The room grew quieter, the murmurs turning to hushed conversations as I made my way to the center of the ballroom. Every eye was on me now. I could feel their curiosity, their judgment, their fascination. They knew something was coming, and in that moment, I realized that the only thing I truly wanted, more than revenge, more than any victory, was to reclaim my own narrative, to be the one to tell my story, not them. I stepped into the spotlight, the soft glow of the chandeliers casting long shadows across my face. My heart was beating faster now, but not with anger, with something else, a quiet resolve. It wasn't the applause I sought. It wasn't the satisfaction of watching them crumble. It was freedom. The eyes of the room were on me as I slowly, deliberately took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and confident. "You all know me as Song Ji-hyun, the heiress, the woman who has seemingly appeared from nowhere. But the truth is, I am someone you all should have known much earlier. I am someone you all took for granted, someone you mistook as weak, as easy to control." There was a sharp intake of breath in the room. The whispers grew louder. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, and that's when I said it. The truth that had been hidden for so long. "I am So-ri, the daughter you never wanted, the woman you discarded, the fiancé you used as a stepping stone to your own success, and now I am the one who controls my own fate." There it was. The revelation that would change everything, the moment when the masks came off, when the lies were exposed. But instead of tearing them down, instead of reveling in their downfall, I stood tall and took back control of my own story. The people who had once treated me as a tool, as a means to an end, now they saw me, truly saw me. But I wasn't here to destroy them. I was here to show them that I no longer needed them, that I was free. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, one by one, the whispers turned into gasps. People started to realize who I truly was, the woman they had underestimated, the woman they had never thought twice about. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the broken woman who had once clung to the hope that love and sacrifice would earn me their respect. I was something far more powerful now. But then, the inevitable happened. My family, my friends, they came to me, their faces desperate, their voices pleading. They didn't know what else to do. They were broken, lost, and they thought I could save them. "Bitsoyeon, please," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We need your help. Our company is failing. You're the only one who can save us. You're our last hope." I looked at her, my heart hardening as I saw the desperation in her eyes. She didn't care for me then. She didn't love me enough to even see me, and now, after everything had fallen apart, she wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to come back, to step in and be the savior she had never acknowledged. "No," I said, my voice unwavering. "You didn't care for me when I needed you. You didn't even notice me when I gave everything. I won't be the one to save you now. This is your mess to fix." Ju-hyun too tried to come to me, his face pale with fear. "Ju-hyun, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out. I'll do anything. Just help me rebuild what I lost." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the anger that had fueled me for so long. I felt something else, relief. I was done with him. Done with all of them. "You're on your own," I said simply. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them behind to face the consequences of their actions. I wasn't walking away out of bitterness. I was walking away because I had finally found the one thing I had been searching for, freedom. I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone. I was free, and I was going to write the next chapter of my life on my own terms. As I walked away from the gala, the weight of the evening settled around me. But it wasn't the kind of weight I had grown accustomed to. It wasn't the burden of expectations or the remnants of anger that had fueled me for so long. No, this weight was different. It was the weight of freedom, of self-empowerment. I had stepped into the light not as the woman they had defined, but as the woman I had chosen to become. The shadows of my past had no claim over me anymore. I had cast them off, and now I was walking toward something new. The world around me blurred as I moved through the crowd, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The noise of the gala faded into the background as I focused on the path ahead. People were still talking, still watching, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't need their approval. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking for anyone else. I was walking for myself. Every step I took felt lighter. Every breath I took felt clearer. The people I had once begged to see me, to notice me, were still tangled in their webs of deceit and pride, but I had cut those ties. My family, my friends, even Juhyun, they were no longer the center of my universe. The center was me now. I had reclaimed my name, my identity, and in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel their eyes on me as I left the venue, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They were no longer a part of my story. I was no longer the woman they had molded me into. I had taken my life back, piece by piece, and now it was mine to shape. Outside, the city lights flickered as I stepped into the cool night air. The city seemed so vast, so full of possibility. The roads I had once thought were closed to me were now open, waiting for me to carve my own path. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time, I felt alive with potential. The woman who had once been afraid to speak her truth, to claim her worth, was gone. In her place stood Song Ji-hoon, the woman who had learned to trust herself, to value herself, and to never let anyone take her power again. I had left behind the life I once knew, a life that had tried to confine me to roles that didn't fit, to identities that weren't my own, but I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was running toward everything I had yet to become. Every mistake, every betrayal, every heartbreak had led me to this moment. They had all been part of the story, but they were no longer the ending. They had been the prologue. The real story was just beginning. I stepped into the future with a new sense of independence and purpose. The woman I had been before, Saori, the one who gave and was never seen, was no more. She had served her purpose, but she was no longer necessary. What mattered now was what I chose to become, and I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. As I walked away from the gala, I felt the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders. The pain, the hurt, the confusion, they were all still there, somewhere deep inside me, but they no longer had a hold on me. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me. I was defined by what I chose to do now. And for the first time in my life, I was making decisions for myself, with no one else's voice in my head, no one else's expectations pulling me in different directions. The camera would have captured the way I moved in that moment, the way my silhouette grew smaller as I walked away, but how my presence seemed to grow larger with every step. The woman who had once been broken, once thought of as weak, was walking towards something powerful. My stride was confident, my gaze forward, unclouded by the past. It was as if the very act of walking away from it all had freed me in ways I couldn't quite explain. The freedom in my eyes was palpable, visible to anyone who looked close enough. It wasn't just about the wealth or the power. It was about something deeper, something that could never be taken from me. I had found the strength to live life on my terms. I was no longer the woman who had to prove her worth to anyone. I had already proven it to myself. And as I walked away, the city lights flickering behind me, I realized something profound. The journey wasn't about revenge. It was never about taking down the people who had wronged me. It was about reclaiming my voice, my life, my story. I wasn't going to let anyone else tell it anymore. As my silhouette disappeared into the night, I knew I was stepping into a new chapter, one that was entirely mine to write, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of the unknown, because I knew now I could face anything. And whatever came next, I would do it on my own terms. The city was fading behind us, the towering skyscrapers shrinking into the distance as the plane soared higher into the sky. A sense of peace settled over me as the hue of the engines filled the cabin. I wasn't looking back anymore. I wasn't looking for answers in the rearview mirror. I had walked away from the life I once knew, and now I was stepping into the unknown. Taijun was beside me, his presence a quiet reassurance. We had shared so much in the time since that fateful gala. tension, vulnerability, and even moments of silence that spoke louder than any words. I had never imagined that a man who had once been an observer of my life would end up walking beside me, but here we were, together embarking on something new, something neither of us could have predicted. The light from the window cast a warm glow over my face, and I glanced at my passport, the pages now marked with a new destination, a new beginning. The ink was fresh, the stamps signifying the passage from one life to another. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a clean slate. Every part of my past had led me here, and I wasn't running from it. I was embracing it, ready to build something entirely different. And as the plane climbed higher, the world below becoming a blur of lights and motion, I felt a quiet thrill deep in my chest. This was what freedom felt like. Not the kind I had once chased through revenge and destruction, but the kind that came with choosing your own path, your own future, without being shackled by the ghosts of your past. I turned to Taijin, who had been watching the clouds pass by, lost in thought. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I could see the understanding there, understanding that had come through everything we had been through. He had seen me at my lowest, had seen the pain and the rage that had driven me, and now he saw the woman I had become. The woman I had fought so hard to be. Next chapter, I whispered, the words carrying more weight than I had ever imagined. He smiled, his gaze soft but knowing. Next chapter, he echoed, his voice steady but filled with the same sense of anticipation that thrummed in my veins. And that was it. No more words were necessary. We didn't need to explain, didn't need to ask for permission. This was our story now, no one else's. The plane flew on, cutting through the sky, and I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the freedom that filled the air. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what it held. I had come to terms with everything, the hurt, the anger, the loss, but it no longer controlled me. It no longer defined me. I had rewritten my own ending, and it was a story that was still unfolding. I had become Get Under That, which was a story that was still unfolding. When I opened my eyes again, I looked out at the horizon, a feeling of boundless possibility filling me. I didn't know what would come next. Maybe we'd find adventure in a new city. Maybe we'd get lost and discover things we never expected. Maybe the future would be unpredictable, filled with challenges and surprises. But I was ready for it. The vengeance I had once craved, the anger that had driven me to the edge, it wasn't my story anymore. I was no longer the woman who needed to prove something. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't a villain. I was simply Ji-hyun, a woman who had found the strength to step into her own light and walk away from everything that had held her back. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time I realized that was the most beautiful part of it all. The past was behind me, the future was waiting, and I was ready to live it. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to prove our worth to others that we forget to prove it to ourselves. In the end, the true victory is not in tearing others down, but in standing tall in our own light, free from the chains of resentment and fear. Ji-hyun chose to walk away from everything that tried to define her, and in doing so, she found her freedom. So ask yourself, are you living for others or are you living for yourself? We want to hear from you. What part of Ji-hyun's journey resonated with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like the video. Let's continue writing our own stories together.